2019. This is an affiliation work study agenda. Scheduled to be from 4:30 to 6 o'clock at Snoqualmie Valley Hospital East-West Conference Room. Val, do we do a roll call?
Yes. Would you please do that?
President Norris?
Here.
Vice President Herron?
Here.
Secretary Spikers?
He's going to be about 15 minutes late. He called.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollard?
Here.
Commissioner Carter? Here. Thank you.
First on the agenda is a due diligence summary update. Who's going to do that?
You're handing it off?
I am.
Okay.
It's yours.
So, so tonight will actually be pretty packed. If I kind of fasten seatbelts and ready to go, because we have two big things to work through with you or to introduce to you. And so this is what we feel like is the conclusion of our due diligence phase. So we have been spending, time looking through lots of information sent to us. We've been to the clean room, so things that it was not the experience we hoped for. It was dull.
It was actually very dull.
It was a dull
They
room.
didn't do any searches or anything as we left, or no.
But the clean room meaning information that they didn't feel comfortable exposing outside of their facility, and so we actually went there and reviewed everything. There was information that was redacted, and so and that was pre-planned. We knew that would be the case. So we're going to do a review with you of everything that we identified, just our summary overview. And so Steve has been the one who's really kept us coordinated in our due diligence review. So he gets the honors.
Do you have any, how about this?
I have it ready to go. If there's
Let's
anything
put
you
it
want
up
me to
there.
pull.
Okay. Remember, you have copies, I believe, of this document also. I promise I am not going to go through every category and do a mind-numbing detailed explanation, but I am open to questions. And I have grouped this document into some larger areas. And the first area we look at is governance. We want to see how are they governed, what is their structure, and how are they managed. And that's, if you look, it's 1.1, it's in the left, to 2.2. And Kim actually did most of this review. We looked at their government documents, minutes of meetings, their organization chart, a list of affiliated entities, and a description of any merger and acquisition activities underway. We found no issues that were of concern. We found all of the information very appropriate and for their governance and their future. And our conclusion was that there are no areas of concern, and that these documents showed us, if you looked at that, they are a fit with the affiliation process that we're going through. Can you give me? Okay. Any questions? I don't want to rush through. If you want time to look at something, please tell me, and I'll slow down.
I just was overwhelmed to get this so late, because it is complex and it does require study.
Right.
And so I can't make up for it here at this meeting.
You'll be able, whatever you've been able to read, whatever summary, but then you'll have it to take with you, because there's no decisions being made on it tonight.
If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. The next area was financial information. That's items 3.1 to 3.22, so a lot of financial information. We looked at their audited and unaudited financial statements. We actually provided you with it's called a ratio analysis, which is their financial ratios, compared them to other hospitals with A or above Standard & Poor's rating. So other hospitals that are doing very well financially based on their Standard & Poor's rating. So when if you
Standard
want to
&
be
Poor's.
rated, you have Standard & Poor's
Yeah.
pour over your financials and your operations and give you a rating.
Right.
And the best ratings are the A rating. So we compared them to A-rated entities.
There's like
You have-
Moody's and the other.
Just Standard & Poor's.
Standard & Poor's,
Moody's is another rating
Another
agency.
rating.
They're interchangeable.
Okay.
Standard & Poor's and Moody's are the two big ones
Yeah.
you hear about.
Okay.
So, and their ratios and their results look very favorable and compare very well and actually high-end for A-rated entities, hospitals, A-rated hospitals.
So Overlake is A-rated, I guess. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And A rating, A is the highest rating they can get, and they can, an A-rated entity can borrow money at the cheapest rate possible. So you want to compare them to an A-rated entity. We looked at, again, the audited financials, no questions. Since I'm a finance guy, they showed strong financial performance.
You said they do have strong financials?
Very strong financial performance. We looked at the interim financial statements, their monthly statements. And it shows that progressing through this year, that strong financial performance is continuing. So, again, no issues on that. We looked at copies of their operating and capital budgets, and there were no concerns. The budgets show, again, a budget for strong performance, which they're meeting, and then capital budgets that are reflective of a strong entity that is looking at expansion of services. So they have money to spend on capital, they're not hoarding it, they are spending it very appropriately to improve services to the community they serve. And again, we looked at capital expenditures, again, very appropriate and service-driven, which is good. And we looked at some reports by consultants and accountants addressing any regulatory or compliance issues financially. We actually didn't find any. So, and go to 3.2.1, I read their management letters from their accountants. If you recall, every year we have our audit done. And-
Twice, both by the state and by a private company, right?
Right,
Okay.
and the ones we looked at were the CPA, those are the important ones. And the CPA firm issues an audit to you, the board. And usually it's a very, what I would say, boring audit, saying things were good, we don't have any major exceptions, any deficiencies. That's what we saw in Overlake's financial statements also. So the auditors found nothing that would cause us an area of concern. And the audit, it says we've done the audit, they cooperated with us and such. So much like you've seen, we get a very positive and good audit letter showing they cooperated and there aren't any major areas of concern. Then 3.2.2 is, we looked for, asked them for, are there any contingent or off-balance sheet liabilities? What that means is, in English, is something that you would conceivably owe someone in the future that's not reflected on your balance sheet. We'll go through, we'll touch on this a couple more times. It could be an underfunded self-insured benefit plan, something like that. There were no unfunded liabilities off balance sheet. So all their financial results, their true financial position is reflected in their financial statements. That was it. That's why you asked that question. I got a few minutes. If a while back, there was a big concern for a lot of municipalities and cities that had an unfunded pension liability. What that meant is that their future payments were understated on their financial statements. There was nothing like that in the overlay. So you want to make sure that the right stuff appears on the financial statements. It's a technical term. So, then 3.23 and 3.24, let's look at what are their strategic plans going forward. And do we think, and both Kim and I looked at those, do we think those are a fit with what we are talking to Overlake about in affiliation? And in our judgment, they were a good fit for what we're talking to them about. Okay, so, 4.1.
Wait, before you go on.
Sure.
It says projections for past 3 fiscal years do not require clean team designation. What is that, a clean?
Clean team is, we were in a clean room.
So it's just about the clean room
It
again?
means that it didn't require that it go to the clean room. The clean room is, well,
Means it's
it was
less
kind of a room, really.
Less confidential. Thank you. Okay, that's what I need to know.
Okay, all right.
Less proprietary.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question before
Sure.
we go on with 3.2.2? And that is that list of all off-balance sheet liabilities. Overlake has property leases expiring, all leases are real estate related. Total value, is that more total obligation rather than value? Because they.
It would be the obligation over 10 years.
Yes, that is not something they own, it's not a.
No.
Asset, it is a liability.
Right, right.
Okay, so.
So is that what they are leasing, what they're?
That's what they will owe in the aggregate, added up over the next 10 years.
On what they lease?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have
Okay,
these-
okay.
They have these branch clinics all over the area. And
Yeah.
I presume that these are the leases we're talking about.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so look at that and say, like, is that reasonable for the size that Overlake is? And yeah, it is, it is. And it also shows they're related to, again, expansion of services, a purpose that fits their business model. That's what we're looking at. 4.11 and 4.12 are tax and regulatory items. File tax returns, they've appropriately filed their tax returns. They have to file a Form 990, they're a 501c3 corporation. That is required of a 501c3. And it was appropriately filed and reflected their audited financial statements. And then we asked them a question, do you have any other investigations that are going on? They have an audit by the Department of Revenue. That's just standard business. We've had audits by the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue routinely comes in and does an audit of, are you paying proper and appropriate sales tax and other revenue-based taxes?
Yeah.
So we had that a number of years ago. Next, 4.21 to 4.2, or 4.2.3, excuse me. 4.2.3 is their compliance with their bond covenants. We've talked about, we have bond covenants. We have certain financial targets we need to meet to satisfy to our bondholders that we are performing well financially. Overlake has the same. They have bonds out. And Overlake is meeting all their covenants, and it doesn't look like they are in any risk of not meeting the covenants in the future. So we want to make sure that they were performing based on their obligations to their bondholders. 5.1 to 5.2, and Kim review these. It's a list of payer contracts and payer obligations. And you didn't find any concerns there. There's nothing concerning in that area. 6.1, 6.66 are compliance-related items. Wanted to look at their compliance program. We have a compliance program. They have a compliance program. Obviously, they're required to. So, are there any investigations going on? And there are not investigations going on with potential obligations over 250,000. They are not operating under what's called a corporate integrity agreement, so they're not operating under anybody's watchful eye. There's nothing going on compliance-wise with them in that respect. And they're not being audited by the Department of Justice, OIG, or CMS. We have no sanctions on that. And we also asked them, do you, in 6.3, what type of reviews do you conduct compliance-wise? And a lot of it is the same stuff we do. They conduct coding audits, bring in an outside expert to say, are we coding our bills, especially to Medicare, correctly? Because that's a big risk for a healthcare entity. Medicare really takes a hard look at, are you coding the appropriate code for the service provided? And they have regular audits like we do. That's very good, standard business practice for a healthcare entity.
And as I recall, there was several years ago, that the number, whatever it is, was, we were the ones that found it. Nobody was getting paid for the particular service. Remember that? You found, somebody in our department that does the billings found that nobody was being paid for a certain item, and it was part of that new coding, and they didn't. Do you remember that?
I don't remember. I remember
It was like one.
No one was getting paid?
No one was getting paid?
No one for that particular item, whatever it was. There was something that we billed for and everybody else was billing for, but Medicare was not paying for. Do you remember that, June?
I wonder if you're thinking
I
of
don't remember that.
I think you may be thinking about
meaningful use.
or we went through a period of time where, due to a system problem with Medicare, we weren't being paid. And
I think that was because it wasn't in their system.
no, it was because
Their system was
Medicare
broken.
did a,
Okay,
Medicare-
that's close enough.
Medicare did a upgrade to their payment system, and it broke it for
I
a while.
remember, okay.
And
That's-
that drove me crazy because
I remember that was a problem.
Medcare's a big payer, and if Medicare isn't paying us, it put a crimp in our
I
cash
remember,
flow,
okay,
to say the least.
it's in the past. But remember.
And so they have appropriate oversight in their compliance area. I looked at their compliance policies and compliance program, the documents related to that, and they have a very robust, which means very active, compliance program. Like we do, but they have more people to run it, so to speak. But it's a very good program, and it's active. They're looking at things. They are saying, okay, just like we do in quality and compliance. Nothing ever goes perfectly. We need to fix this, so let's fix it. They have the proper tools in place to catch things that need to be adjusted. So they have a very good compliance program, but they want to steal some of their policies. So, and then we looked at the minutes from the compliance meetings. Is there the active and appropriate level of presentation and discussion going on in their compliance program? And the answer was yes, no concerns in their compliance program. And just, they got the same kind of audits we do. They have HIPAA audits, they have billing audits and such, looking at how you're billing, how you're complying with regulations. 7.1 to 7.7, we looked at their benefit plans, and a couple of areas we looked at. Benefit plans, do they look appropriate? Do they provide a robust benefit package to their employees? Also, we looked at more of the, okay, and if they're self-funded, have they had actuarial reviews to verify that yeah, you're correctly funding, you're adequately funding your benefit plan? And we had no issue with their benefit plans or their funding of the benefit plans. Hi, David, good to see you.
To see you. I don't even have a pen.
You do now.
An extra one.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yeah.
And that is, their benefit plan is going to be different from our benefit plan. Is that a problem in any way, or is that something where we can perhaps join the more beneficial plan
It's,
somehow?
is it a problem? No.
Yeah.
How will it be handled? Kim will talk about, the current talks we have about the type of structure we have, and that's going to affect, do we provide benefits, do our employees get on overlay? That's way down the line.
Yeah, I think the real answer is we don't know.
We don't
yet.
know, yeah.
Because everyone's acknowledged that they're a bit different, and so, yes, there has been conversation about the bringing together or not, leaving them separate, because there's some benefits of leaving them separate, because there's some things that actually our staff have better access to than theirs. So it just really hasn't risen to having scrutiny placed on it yet.
That is a detail that will have to be handled going forward. 7.5, we reviewed, Kim, myself, and our HR manager have reviewed their human resource policy. So a lot of scrutiny on that, and they're appropriate. It also, Kim and I were talking, gave us a good feeling that, well, they're a lot like ours, so I think ours are pretty appropriate too, so, yeah. And then 7.6, they want to make sure they had a actuarial review of their self-funded benefit plan. And that's what I talked about, making sure that they have the proper numbers reported for benefits and the potential future benefit costs. And they have had an actuarial review, which is, you would have to if you were self-funded. And we asked them then, 7.7, kind of catch-all question. Okay, show us anything that's evidence of your non-compliance with federal and state laws concerning benefits and employee-employer relationships. They didn't have anything, which is very good to hear. 8.1 to 9.1 are regulatory issues. 8.1 was, okay, is any regulatory agency, is there any pending action from a regulatory agency? And there were none. Wanted to look at reviews, joint commission reviews and surveys, and Kim reviewed those, and the surveys were appropriate, and the surveys were what you'd expect from a survey. You want to add more?
No, they performed very well.
Okay. And we asked them for a list of any pending lawsuits or legal actions, and there are none known to them at this point. So, And then 9.2 was really a catch-all and said, give us anything else you think we should look at. They didn't have anything. I think that they probably thought our list was fairly complete. If you go to 9.3, we kind of went overboard on the unfunded liabilities, but we asked the question again, and they said, we have had reviews completed by Gallagher Associates on our funding of our benefit plans. 10.1 was a question, but do you have any plans in place to materially change your operations, outsource some services, outsource some functions, consolidate lines of business? And there are not any at this point. So, what we are looking at, our conversations, wouldn't be, oh, we talked to you about this 6 months ago, and now you've done a 90-degree turn. No, there's no 90-degree turn in operations or strategy that they are contemplating. And the last one was, Kim reviewed this, the most annual leapfrog report. Sounds like something from Mark Twain, but it's not. It's a quality survey that is done annually on hospitals on safety and quality and efficiency. You might want to add more than that, because that's your
I think most everyone is familiar with Leapfrog. So
Okay.
it is exactly like you said, it's about safety and quality, and so it's an assessment of, do you have safety standard safety features in place? Can you demonstrate evidence of those safety features actually being in utilization? It's a tremendously long survey to accomplish, and so then you're rated on. There's a big pile of information that you submit in for Leapfrog also to analyze. That we just submitted ours a month ago, so I can witness the pain that it is to put together. But anyway, their performance was quite good. They got an A rating, and that is a challenge to get an A rating. So they're really only Overlake gets an A rating. Virginia Mason historically gets an A rating as well. And they're about the only two in the state that are pretty consistent in that regard. And so even with their A rating, there was some opportunities for improvement, which was interesting and comforting that it's the same areas that we put a lot of time and energy into. So just it's a we're not alone feeling. So they also work on CAUTIs, which you guys have heard before. They look at CLAPSIs, which is central line associated bloodstream infections, and then surgical site infections following colon cancer and cancer surgery. Those are areas that were they had opportunities to do better in, and that they've already got.
You just opened a
actions.
cancer center a year, 2 years ago.
This isn't their cancer center, that's their outpatient.
Oh, the outpatient.
This is the cancer
inpatient.
surgeries that they've
Oh,
done for
okay.
years.
I didn't see something on here that I just thought about. Do they have any plans for a community health census at all? Do they have any?
Community health needs
Needs
assessment.
Yeah, have
assessment?
they done one recently, or? do
Yeah,
they have one?
they're current, and they're in their
Yeah.
3-year cycle.
3 years, I thought it was in 2.
3.
We had ours done 16, we have to have ours done at the end of this year.
Say that again, please.
Our last one was done in 2016, we need to have our present one done at the end of 2019.
Yeah.
He's been our
Oh.
reminder.
Well, the thing that's disappointing was, I think we called that a health data survey in 2016. It was not a regular community health needs assessment that meets the requirements of the IRS, and they're the ones that are setting the standard. So I hope that we can do our own community health needs assessment and not piggyback onto overlays, because we have different communities, different health needs.
We do. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
So we walked away with following kind of high-level impressions: strong financially, strong, well-capitalized, And that's a fancy way of saying they have a good amount of money and access to money, and access to capital for a project such as they're contemplating with us. They have appropriate oversight of quality and of compliance issues. That doesn't mean they're not doing anything wrong. It means that they will call in people to help them out and look over their shoulder and give them advice, which is something you want in a quality organization.
And as you look through our assessments, you'll see notations of things that were identified that needed correcting.
Mhm.
You know, so they were, not only were they transparent to us
Yeah.
to see those things, but those are jotted down under for you, just that they exist and that they are working on them. And we were able to see evidence of either recovery completed, you know, back to a standard level of performance, or processes in place right now.
And so we didn't find any red flags, any areas of concern in relation to this project.
I was late, I don't know if anybody's asked this question about the real estate leases that are expiring in the neighborhood of
10 years.
Yeah. In 10 years from now?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, in 10 years.
It's 10 years, yeah, it's, you know, and they were very upfront in telling us, you know.
What leases are those?
Some, mostly, I believe, it's some clinic spaces and such that.
Probably similar to what we have.
So it's not giant leases?
It's not giant leases.
Maybe $1 million or $2 million or something a year?
Yeah, probably a couple million a year or so. It's going forward 10 years, they got 38 million.
Okay.
And nothing they can't handle given their financial situation. It's appropriate.
My understanding is anything that's not on the campus, they lease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That would make
their
sense.
ownership is only right there on the campus.
And that makes sense. That makes sense.
Any other questions from the board? I guess we can move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get us caught up. So, just a reminder again of what the agenda is today. So we did the due diligence. We'll talk about the definitive agreement section, and we'll be focusing really on the, that abandoned interest payment recoupment that we, that I kind of keyed you in on the last time when we were meeting for the work study, the regular work study session. I, updated you that there was an issue, and so we'll spend some follow-up time on that. And then the trust and the other things that are under a normal look. So, just a reminder of what we talked about at the work study session, that if we look at the way we operate right now, our big buckets of revenue are from operations, dollars, taxes, as well as what we give back on the cost report. And the only one I'm drawing attention to is the interest expense that we get back on the cost report, which is on the order of $1.5 to $1.9 million. And that's the interest that we pay on our LTGO bonds and our revenue bonds. Our expenses are expenses that we incur in the process of operation, and then the interest expense. So in the concept that's been on the table, the generating NUCO, and NUCO would take with them the cost report, and then the district would continue forward, and it would maintain the interest expense. And so now, if this is when we said, let's start, just trace the money as the money goes into the new solution. So you see where revenue from operations goes with NUCO. The revenue from taxes comes to the district. The expense from operations goes to NUCO, where operations are occurring. And the interest expense stays with the district, because they're the ones responsible for the interest expense. And so the issue was the abandonment of that $1.5 to $1.9 million that are getting recouped through the cost report. And that's because in the new scenario, by breaking into two entities, no longer does the interest expense and the cost report reside within the same entity. They're in two separate entities. And so it just becomes abandoned. Nobody gets it. It is not recoverable. In the scenarios we had it laid out. So this was where I left you, sorry, at the last work study session, just said, 24 hours ago, here's where we landed in our conversations with Overlake, and then I said we will spend the next 2 weeks working and coming up with some solution concepts, and then come back, and that's what we'll talk about tonight, is some of the solution concepts that have come up. In no way are these fleshed out and at any level of detail. They really are still at the concept level. And we have, I think, 3 different meetings set up next week, just to, just looking at it from a lot of different perspectives. So what you're seeing tonight really is truly mid-course through this, looking at what new options might be. So let me just just a quick reminder, it always helps me to look at this, just to remind ourselves why we're heading down this path, about making sure that we remain viable, making sure, looking at opportunities to elevate brand presence so we can increase volume, growing scope of services, and then strengthening our clinical service line, as well as the ability to focus more on population health than we've been able to do to date.
Where will we be specific about what those will be?
About what?
Scope of services, for example.
Yeah.
At what point are we going to be able to discuss that and see that?
Quite a bit down the road from here, because we have to figure out how to actually do the business and operational alignment, and then will be the opportunity for service lines. But if you'll remember, in the LOI, we were very specific that there not be any significant changes in the service lines for the first year, because that first year is intended to be an assessment of what does the market really need before just sweeping changes come in.
I'm just thinking about the short term of the agreement that we're going to come to, which is 7 years.
Yeah.
And 1 year, you spend sort of marking time and getting to know each other, et cetera. The time's going to go by very fast. And I
yeah.
would feel more comfortable if the lease were longer, because it would show to me a greater commitment by
Yeah.
Overlake than a 7-year lease that's going to go by so quickly.
So I'm gonna having heard everything you said,
Yeah.
hold it, because it is going to be a super valuable comment just a little bit later. Yep. So just to do a quick, because I want to have everybody on the same page, so sorry I'm going kind of slow. So right now, what we've been talking about, so the one that we've declared to have a flaw in it. So this is, I'm just reiterating the one that we've been looking at, and it's the lease operating agreement. And in that scenario, the district is in a landlord position. The revenue to the district is taxes and lease payments. And the expense to the district is the revenue bond and the LTGO bond payments. So again, super high level, just big buckets. In the lease operating agreement, Overlake or NewCo, so I'm sorry I just used Overlake here, but we all know that that's really NewCo. It would take on full responsibility for operations, which means both their revenue and their expense are all associated with operations, and they also have the cost report, because the cost report would go with Overlake NewCo. And this is what Commissioner Pollard was just referring to as it having its first interval is the 7 years, so up until the bonds are callable in 2025, with a decision point at that point in time to renew, to purchase. I think our preference has been to push towards purchase, but that's just to reiterate, that is what's on the right-hand side. An alternative concept has been proposed, and that is around a management services concept. So as we've been talking through it, we needed to create a scenario to say, what's that like? What does that mean? Because our brains are so much over onto the lease operating. So the scenario that we came up with is, it is very similar to the farmer who's been living on his farm and he owns his farm, and he has decided that he's gonna move to town. He's hit a retirement age and he's going to move to town, but he is not selling his land, he's not selling his farm, he wants to continue to be operational. He's gonna have a farm manager come in and take responsibility for all operations of the farm. That farm manager is rewarded for performance, so good crops, good management, good hires, good productivity, he's rewarded for that. So it's not just paid a base pay, but he's rewarded if he does better, so incentives. And then, but he continuously sending reports to the owner in town. So that was the concept we were working around so that we could keep this pretty solid.
Isn't that what Virginia Mason proposed, somewhat like that?
Somewhat like that, somewhat like that. A little more hands-off than what Overlake is proposing, but you're right, it's in the right category. That is what they proposed. So then just to put it parallel to the one that we're used to, under a management services concept, so the district, who is the owner, revenue now would come from taxes and from a portion of the operations. Because the district remains the owner, the district maintains expenses because it's their business that's getting operated, it's just getting managed by somebody else. The cost report does stay with the district. So again, you see that capture of that $1.5 to $1.9 million with the cost report staying with the district. Overlake, so the hired operator who's coming in who would get paid an amount to be there, but also a benefit to incentivize to perform better and to perform efficiently. So that would be where the revenue comes in. And then the expenses, first blush would be none on a financial basis. They would have reputational loss if they did poorly. We do ask the question if there is a path in here where there's a way to indemnify the district should there be any losses, where the district isn't the only one holding that, in the same way that the manager participates in things that are run efficiently and have high productivity, a way to also participate in losses and inefficiencies or low productivity. So that's still a question just to sort through. It's not a traditional way of doing these, but we still want to push the envelope and just ask, we're just asking an enormous number of challenging questions and do pushback. I'm going to pause there before we go to the next desk if there's any questions.
Well, it seems to me this management services, we have more say about what's going to happen, but we also have more skin in the game.
Yeah, we do.
Which is something that I don't want to have a lot of skin in the game. I don't want to have to be responsible financially for someone else's operations at all.
Yeah.
Well, we're unprepared for us to toggle back and forth between several of these slides. So again, just an effort to speak to everyone's way of learning, the words, but offer just to do the visual here. The image on the right is the one that you've been seeing all along, that nothing changed. So I edited that to represent the flow of funds under a management services side. So under the management services side, the hospital and clinic business, so the blue circle that's inside the square, that business is owned by the district, that green triangle at the top. The operations of the hospital and clinic are kind of redundant down below.
Put the line over them.
Yeah, the circle. So Overlake is responsible for the operations of the business that is owned by the district. So all the funds that come out of operations actually go to the district, and then the district will
Reimburse.
pay based on the contract Whatever performance measures the contract identified that they would reward.
Yeah.
So an enormous amount of work that would have to go into that.
Mhm.
It's possible, but there's
more
layers and
employees.
layers and layers in there.
Yeah, there's a whole
What's
lot of
that?
detail.
I would think you'd have to hire additional employees the district would have to oversee.
Just to
Yeah.
manage that, yeah.
And then you also have the possibility that Overlake just decides to just kind of limp it along for the 6 years. It's gonna be 5 years by the time this, by the way, 5 years, and they say, well, this is really not doing too well, we'll give you a discounted offer on the hospital. So I don't like that at all.
So-
Can't they do a sub-corp
Hasn't
of the
happened yet.
hospital?
No. But back to what, this is the place where Commissioner Pollard's idea comes in. As we've been having this conversation about the management services, they've actually said 7 years is way too short. When it's We Overlake talking, they say 7 years is way too short. We've just kind of barely got things going. By then, it'll be hard to make an assessment. We would like to have, if we want to do the management services, since that doesn't have an association really with the revenue bonds, we would like to do that for a very long lease time. So something, they said 10 years, renewing for 10 years, 20 years with renewals at 20 years. So they're recognizing and agreeing that the 7-year time span is really short, and it's been artificially established because that's when the revenue bonds become callable, and that's when they could purchase. And so that was what was establishing the whole time frame on the right-hand side.
It's actually only 5.5
Yeah, 2025,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's not
getting
long.
shorter
It's getting
all the
shorter,
time. And so
Yeah,
they're,
as we meet, it's
Yeah.
getting shorter.
you know,
Just
so,
got
so
10
just so you
seconds
know,
shorter.
that anxiety, that recognition that time is getting shorter is shared by everybody.
Well,
There's
isn't there a
no-
possibility of doing both things? And that is have a longer lease, which still recognize there is a decision point that can operate.
This
Yeah.
seems very
And
inefficient,
postpone.
this way.
It's a little clunkier.
Yeah.
But you were saying you need to hire a bunch of people. We've actually been talking about that and really feel like that it's a hire of one.
Mhm.
As we look at it, that it won't be a huge additional
But-
investment, but we've been thinking on that
Hire
front too.
one, the right person, which is probably gonna be a high-level person
Yeah.
to do it.
It'll be somebody-
Able to
It won't
oversee.
be, it'll be 150,000.
Yeah, maybe,
But-
Pros and cons of the two. And so what we've done is throw some seed thoughts up here, but there's more, and so that's what I just want to say, start
yeah.
thinking, now that you've had this information for all of 7 minutes,
Well,
you can start
why
throwing
can't-
some pros and
So
cons
I'm not
out.
a corporate
No,
lawyer,
yeah.
but why can't we create a sub-corp run by Overlake? We actually own we actually oversee the sub-corp, but the sub-corp is basically on their own. I mean, I know there's a ton of big corporations that, like that little car company, Car2Go,
Mhm.
it's owned by Daimler. It's a wholly owned
Daimler
subsidiary
Chrysler.
of Daimler Chrysler. So, I would think somebody should be looking at that.
Okay.
I really think this management thing is just gonna be a pain in the tail end.
So keep talking, because, so you would say the sub-corp would be that.
A hospital
the hospitals-
sub-corporation.
The hospital has a sub-corp?
Yep. So that way,
Yeah.
we still own the hospital and control it, so to speak, but the sub-corp is basically on its own. The only thing you have to do is report the bottom line to the corporation.
Okay. So the sub-corp is for the purpose of operations.
Of operation.
Operations, yeah, lease operating.
And that would be Overlake, yes,
Yeah.
it would.
No.
No, or would that be us?
That would be
That would be
us.
us.
Yeah.
We would have to be able to continue to receive those 1.5 to 1.9.
Yeah.
interest benefits.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I would think, did you talk to our attorney?
Yes.
And what did he say?
Oh, he's,
Oh.
yeah, he's been in all of these meetings
Yeah.
too. So the subcorp idea didn't come up in name, but there have actually been several ideas floated that are really, really similar to that. And,
Such as, what are some of them?
So this is the idea
The
here, is
subcorp,
the
okay.
management services, but the
Yeah.
way that you accomplish it is by way of having the district overlay and an intermediate body here, and it's this intermediate body which actually protects the two from liabilities of either side. And so in here is where you have a lot of the work, of things that you're saying, the responsibilities, the billings, the setting the policies, all of that. It's this intermediate in the middle.
On that, you could dictate, however the articles of incorporation, whatever they dictate is what they would do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this one in the middle, still, so you all as a district entity still have these regulatory things, these statutes that you have to accomplish. And so you can still do those through this intermediate body, so, I'm trying to think of one really quick, but assuring that there's adequate health care, assuring that there's a quality program, those things, you exert those through this intermediary
Right.
body, yeah. The role of superintendent really stays with the district, it doesn't come over here to the intermediary body, it remains the superintendent role, and that way always looking out for the assets and the interests of the district,
Right.
staying separate here. But this body also becomes the place where there's conversations about capital expenditures, capital expansions. This is where the budget is presented before it gets approved, because the district would continue to be the approving body of the final budget, like you said, the rolling it up at the high level. So what's the purpose of the third entity over here, overlay? They're the ones who would actually send the expertise, the responsibility, the management of those. That's where they need their contributions, and so then that would all happen in this intermediary body.
And probably either a loan to the subcorp or some kind of financial.
To get it going?
From
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
If they loaned it to that, they could write it off to overlay. That'd be a good expense to write off on that end. And the other entity could use it. I would think that there would be tax advantages. I'm not a tax attorney, but I would think there would be tax advantages.
On the overlay side.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, because as it being a subcorp, then the center, so you're calling it subcorp, so I'm happy to call it that. The cost report still is connected here. Between these two, between the district and the subcorp, that cost report's attached there, and so you still get your recovery.
Are you sure that no certificate of need is required if there's management service option taken?
Correct.
That's surprising to me.
Yeah, because there's no change of control.
You might have to have one on the subcorp though, if you would.
What'd you say, David?
I'm thinking,
What'd you just say?
you probably would have to have a certificate of need approval on the subcorp.
On the subcorp.
I'm just thinking,
Might need.
you probably agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes, you would,
think it
because you,
probably would.
because you created a new entity
Yeah.
that's going to take on
And
the
you've changed.
responsibility.
Yeah, I agree.
Somewhere. Yeah, probably.
You can't do much without a certificate. They're really sensitive to that in the state.
Yes.
Whatever their motivation is, they are.
They are motivated.
And by the way, aren't we on a time frame after the first of the year too?
That's only for whether or not we have to also go through Attorney General review. That's the only
We
thing
don't
that's
know
the
if we
first
have
of
to
the year.
yet, right?
If the definitive agreement is signed before January 1st, we do not. If the definitive agreement is signed after, then we do. And so I think we've all decided to, if we have to, we have to, and if we don't, we don't. And we just need to get all the other pieces right. And because I think we've also, because of the conversations that we've had, we've come to learn that the Attorney General review, it's pretty straightforward.
It
And
was
it's
pretty
not,
pro forma, they've not done one before.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. They anticipate trying to ask additional questions within a 30-day period, so they're not trying to make this gigantic, they're just making sure that nobody slides anything under the radar.
exactly.
That's the whole thing.
Probably
That's
things,
good
the
to know.
pros and cons to, the big things to point out is, so the certificate of need is one, it's needed in one and not the other, so if you don't need certificate of need, then the whole transaction becomes much faster. And with certificate of need, we're 12 to 15 months, so end of 2020. Without certificate of need, we're like breakneck speed, it can happen really fast, which kind of, there's pros and cons to both of those, slow and fast. The need to be long-term was something that, that's what you were calling out, Commissioner Pollard, is the value of long-term. And so if we did something in the management services sub-core concept, it would really need to have a long-term, but a path to purchase, have that be a defined part of it, that it's not a forever. It's somehow there's a path to purchase in there, even if it's at some point in time after the revenue bonds become callable. They become first callable in 2025. They're also callable in 2026 and 2028.
You can call them after,
2030.
yeah.
It doesn't
And there's
have to
one
be the
callable
end of the lease.
next year.
It can be at any point
Yes,
in the lease, really.
Yes.
After the callable bonds are
Exactly.
available.
exactly. So that's all come into the conversation too. The management services agreement has the pro in that there's no transfer of, so all the employees don't have to be transferred, all the leases don't have to be transferred, all the contracts don't have to be transferred.
Still remain
And so
here.
there's some simplicity because they remain with this entity, which is, like you said, but there's plenty of other pros and cons, I agree. This is just to kind of capture and have our minds start thinking about them, because it's hard really to identify a dramatic one that's positive, negative over the other.
It seems like there's a lot of vagueness on how to work out.
Well,
with
because it's 2 weeks old.
the cost of poor-
This
What's
is
not a solution, this is a potential.
This is 2 weeks,
The
this is
cost of
just
poor
a,
performance, I mean,
yeah, so
what are you gonna base that on?
Yeah.
You know?
yeah. So next, I'll just jump to next steps, but like I said, we can keep toggling back and forth. So we said, for management services, start contemplating it as a multi-year interim solution until either just decision to purchase, one of the decisions to purchase will probably be triggered off of when the LTGO interest starts to wane, and that $1.5 to $1.9 million that's left on the table is no longer $1.5 to $1.9 million. It's a much less number. So now it's much less consequential, and so it doesn't have such a decision, such an impact on the timing of the decision of when to buy. So that model is being worked out, and Misty was supplying them with some amortization schedules today. And then staying over in the lease operating option, the one that we've been working on. So even saying, is there still an opportunity to stay in that one? There is this solution called a common interest option. And we haven't talked about this at all yet. But that is when you can declare that there is a significant portion of the business as a whole. So it would be us with Overlake saying there's a portion of the hospital district operations that actually is of shared common interest. And so remember we said that the cost report goes with NUCO? But if there is evidence, if we can take the path that says that LTGO bonds are directly associated with some of the things that Overlake now has in their hands that they're using to operate the business, then the cost report that NewCo will be submitting can capture the interest expense paid by the district on their behalf. You can capture it because it's common interest. It does require identifying the amount of common interest. And again, this is one of the meetings that we're having next week. So Ide Bailey is being recruited to come in and speak, partly because of their expertise. They really are, top experts in the country when it comes to complex cost report issues. And it becomes a third person or a third cost report voice because Wipfli is representing us, DZA is working with Overlake, and the triad, the triumvirate of cost reporting is Wipfli, DZA, and Ide Bailey. So we will all three work. So they're fascinated with the idea. So we'll see how. So it is still possible. There's a path for the lease operating agreement. There's also an exploration, though not with a lot of gusto, of the idea of if we say that the 1.5 is lost, can it be made up by just charging a higher lease? And this is circuitous, but if a higher lease is charged, lease is another thing that you get back on the cost report. So do you replace the 1.5 that's lost by the interest expense? Do you replace it with a recapture of lease? It's pretty circuitous. The concern is that while that works 1 year, it works against you the next year because you've got more back. And it's, again, not a lot of energy around it, but as it got thrown out and tossed, as we were doing kind of a brainstorming session, we decided to hold on to it and take it all the way to failure. But as everybody's expectation is it will fail, but we want to take it to failure. And then we can say there was good reason to have it excluded from the consideration.
Get more brains on it. I mean, that's
Yeah,
discussion,
so
so we get some
yeah,
expert,
yeah.
a lot of expertise looking at this.
Yeah, so that just kind of doing a high-level tally cost report and watch what happens from 1 year to the next when you do that. So,
Is there anything we can learn from others?
Right.
Best practices is our motto.
yes,
And for example, at one point, Mr. Spiker suggested we talk to University of Washington. That didn't go anywhere, but what about Valley of Monroe, Valley of Renton? Is there anything we can learn from that? Or
from the UW Valley?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's part of what's included here in the next steps as well, and there's a lot of details I didn't throw up here to try and have it not be overwhelming. But we're trying to pull some examples that we can say are really similar, and so we can tease out experience from that. So yes, we're looking at the UW Valley. We're looking at the VM Yakima.
Yeah.
What about
We're
the
looking-
Verdant model? Remember we were
No,
talking about
that's,
that?
the Verdant model was
Because
over
they
here on the
are
right.
On that side, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so the
just-
models that are over here on the left is the UW Valley, the
The
VM
The
Yakima.
VM, yeah.
How about
and
Evergreen Valley?
Evergreen
of
Valley,
Monroe?
Evergreen Valley
Means
Monroe is a good, not a good, I don't want to say good, because there's a lot of things not good about that, which everybody involved is generous to offer, and so, which is fine. It's like, okay, so if we followed something like that, we've got lots of input into how to do it differently. The people who say, if I did it differently, I would do it this way, so we've got them. But that would be the example of the sub-core, the way a part of how they did it. So that's what we're collecting, and then Brian is asking his colleagues in Raleigh and Indianapolis, so different parts of the country, he's asking them to see if they can go out and just kind of filter through the groups that they've had association or they've done these type of deals with and grab some examples and bring in. So again, this next week we actually have, and then just a lot is gonna be flying in our direction. Yeah, this week and the following week both, so, because we wanted to say, let's at least see how it flew, even if it's a portion of it, how did it go in real life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry, there's, I know it's like a lot up in the air and a lot of now moving pieces. It was feeling so tidy, what we were putting together. And it's not, and so the idea we've been working on, the lease operating agreement, is not off the table or abandoned. It just has some really negative, bad taste for everybody to think about walking away from that much money.
Tell me if I'm being too much of an optimist. In the new model, the district's revenue opportunities are taxes, like we had before, but also operations. And in the past, when we've looked at post-affiliation budgets, there's been very little money left for public health. It's all been bond payments, bond payments, bond payments. If Overlake comes in, we do this management services arrangement, and if they knock it out of the park,
Correct.
then
Correct.
we're in the money.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll be a part of the park.
So we're part of the park, all right.
Yeah.
So I mean,
That's
that's.
exactly right.
Yeah, no, that's good.
That's a
It has-
triple pro,
it has a-
possibly.
Very significant upside.
Uh-huh.
But we're also left holding the bag if it doesn't go.
It does, and you know, that's part of, you know, the
Yeah.
due diligence.
Yeah.
To date, actually pairs really nicely with having concluded the due diligence, which the outcome of that was, they've got a really, really strong bottom line, really strong processes, no big liabilities coming up, and so, and a great reputation, so you would think that, you know, you'd place your money, you'd place your bets on it going
Right.
well. You have to be
Although,
prepared for
we're
it.
taking all the financial risk, the fact they have strong financials indicates a really strong culture and a really strong
Correct.
company,
Correct.
but not necessarily that they're gonna run this place in a way that's gonna make, well, I guess it does. It indicates that they would run it in a way that would make a ton of money.
Yeah.
I take it back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
reputation,
think
and
they would.
reputation to them
Yeah.
is very important. In fact, that's part of why all of this has gone so methodical and slow, is because the last thing they want is for this to not go well, and it's because they were not methodical and slow and intentional about it.
On this left and right dichotomy here, which side would present, allow us to continue calling ourselves Snoqualmie Valley Hospital, and which more or less obligates us to hang an overlay sign up and take ours down?
Both sides are intended to allow overlay branding. But whether that means Snoqualmie Valley Hospital sign remains or not is not, that's one of those other things that's kind of
Yeah.
deeper down the path. But as far as the branding piece of this and the naming, that has equal on both sides. It
Oh,
doesn't, neither of the choices or either choice doesn't force anything in that regard.
It would look
Okay.
like the biomedical center and Utah Medical Center, the Valley Medical. Their signs are both there.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it is our desire to, in some way, leverage the Overlake brand. So
I
how
have
we-
some
how
questions
we
about that.
accomplish that.
There are some real advantages from a strong Snoqualmie Valley Hospital and in terms of the acceptance of the people.
And I think that's, when we get to that point in the conversation, I think we will have to recruit a lot of that input about where's the value proposition of some dual branding, blended branding, one or the other. It's
Yeah.
too far in advance, but neither of these
Okay,
options
that was
precludes
my
any
question.
choices,
But
which was your real
back
question.
to the
yeah.
University of Washington, I think what they have done, or what they offered or suggested, was that you'd stay at Snoqualmie Valley Hospital, but underneath it would say affiliate of the University of Washington, or something like that.
To us?
Yeah.
That's more what Virginia Mason offered. UW offered for us to be allowed to go into their for-profit management arm, which is an association that they have with a company out of the
Oh,
Carolinas,
yeah, it's the
Tennessee,
Carolina, yeah.
somewhere back there.
Oh,
It's
not Tennessee, oh,
I know.
those guys.
Yeah, it's a company that I don't remember. I don't
Funded by
remember the name of
Equity
it.
Capital, and I forget the name of them, yeah.
Well-
I can
Yeah.
It's
tell you though, with UW, if we associate with UW, you're going into the UW. You do not stay out here. If you need MRIs, if you need certain services, they expect you to go to the University of Washington or to Harborview. And I don't know that, because I'm in that system, and I ended up doing my MRI here only because somebody said, you know, you don't have to do it in there. They wanted me to go to UW. So unless you know that you can go outside the system, they direct you in the system. And for this community, I think that's a stretch.
Well,
Yes,
I
and
don't
you
know, the Valley of Renton with the University of Washington, they do so many knee and hip replacements. They don't send you to downtown to the University of Washington. They do a tremendous number right there in Renton.
Right. The University of Washington was very clear that they did not have an appetite for expanding the University of Washington healthcare system. Out here, they were already overextended by Northwest and Valley. Because that had kind of maxed them out. The only thing they were willing to do was to allow us association with their equity partner.
Yeah, Equity partner.
So their equity partner, they would grant us access to them, and that equity partner would now, we would be a subsidiary of that. So that was where we took it off the table really fast, because it really violated almost everything that we had said as our reasons for, our reasons for affiliate. It violated almost every one of those, because it just
It
couldn't
didn't
get
meet our
there.
criteria for
Yeah.
affiliation.
And then you're right, all you would get was a subsidiary, and Virginia Mason, that was what they had on offer too, was a subsidiary. Or we didn't flesh out things too deeply with Virginia Mason. We do know that they said they also were pretty tapped out with the Yakima affiliation, and so all they really could offer was some management expertise, as opposed to taking the full management services and taking ownership
Well,
of all things management.
It's too late now, but I always envision the Virginia Mason possibility. It has a real advantage for Virginia Mason and people. I go to Virginia Mason Clinic in Issaquah all the time, because there is no inpatient facility for Virginia Mason on the east side. And I've used their hospital, my wife, and used their hospital downtown. But the traffic in Seattle, people don't want to go to Seattle for any reason.
I
So
agree.
it would be so great if there were a Virginia Mason inpatient facility on the east side. But that's water under the bridge. So,
Yeah, same situation.
Agreed. They didn't let us decide. Because I'm with you. I think having a presence over here on this side would allow them to grow a lot more. More?
it's very complicated
lot.
for those of us who are not corporate finance experts. That's why I think we need to depend a lot on our finance committee to study a lot of this stuff. And you have done a remarkable job in, it sounds like
I'm
you're a
with you.
corporate lawyer.
It does.
I'm with you. It's very complicated.
Very complicated.
It's very complicated. That's why I draw pictures.
Well-
Because I figured out. So there will be so much more information gathered over the course of these next couple of weeks. So if something significant transpires, I'll make sure that we figure out a way to get that communicated. But so no news is fine news. If you don't hear anything from me, then we're just
We're still
continuing
looking,
on.
yeah.
We're continuing on. But if anything of significance occurs, I'll figure out a way to get a message to you, because I feel like these next couple weeks are pretty important.
Yeah, if you could flesh out the managerial option,
Yeah.
the management
Oh,
services option.
Absolutely. This
Yeah,
is this is such a superficial
Yeah.
presentation, and again, it's just because it's so fresh.
Seems
There's not
like
been any time to
Ton
dive
of
down.
issues.
And
in my mind, but,
there's
no.
my list is really long too. What is that? What about?
Yeah,
What about? What about?
yeah. How does that
Yeah.
work?
So
Questions?
I know it felt unfair to bring it to you without any more detail, but I needed to get you guys up to where we are too, so that we're all thinking the same thing. Emma, you've been trying to
I
say
have a
something. I'm
question,
sorry.
because I think we did talk about at one time, at least one of the Board of Commissioners should be involved in reading the financial or reviewing, and what happened to that? Like, for example, you just mentioned that Finance Committee should be involved to read those report from what they're requesting over Lake, so we were asking if one of the.
Yeah, that was
So-
brought up in the,
Yeah.
so both our council, both Skip and Brian,
Right.
said that it is standard that your executive team and your affiliate, your attorneys that represent you, that's who does the review. That was even a Becker's recommendation, that we went and pulled all of that out, what the recommendations were. So that was just, because I, like you, remember that conversation, but that was the outcome of it. And then to bring it back in this summary
I
form.
guess I'm saying because this is a major deal, and, you know, one of our authority is to look into every aspect of the affiliation process, and neither any of us here is involved in, you know, in the conversation with Overlake, so you're just bringing us the information from what you gathered, so it would be nice if there's another set of eyes from our end, rather than, you know, a
Well,
one-way.
one thing I do in the finance meetings is anything that might affect possibly
This
this
merger, or
affiliation
this
process.
affiliation, yeah.
I do tend to ask questions, and if there's something,
Okay.
I have said things, well, we may not want to do this because we're going to be doing negotiations here pretty
Yeah.
soon. I do bring that up in the regular meetings if I can, but it's more of a, 30,000-foot level type of thought. It's not, we're not getting into the nitty-gritty.
And I think that's because we don't have any real concrete
We
nitty
don't
gritty.
have any right now,
Yeah.
so.
If the nitty gritty were concrete, we might be able to know what
Yeah,
to say or
and
ask.
My
but-
guess is we're all going to get more information in a couple weeks, and we'll all be able to put our eyes on it at least. That's some of the information. Be able to
Which I think we all should.
That's something.
Are we in a strong position, or does Overlake view us as hat in hand? Because
No.
Not at all.
No, not anymore.
I would think it'd be more symbiotic instead of they need us or we need them. I think it's more, we could partner together well.
Well, I think the first time around in November of 2013, when we went through this exercise before, I think they treated us like we were a bunch of country bumpkins.
Well, yeah, it was, that we were fruit off the,
Just keep
low
in mind, this
fruit
is all
off the
being
tree then.
recorded. So just be thoughtful about what we may be saying about our future partners.
Transparency. It's wonderful.
Future partner.
I think everybody has said, Overlake and us included, that what's in the past should remain in the
Yes.
past, and that this is a
Agreed.
fresh, we're in a different place.
Right.
Because you're right, in the last time we did this, we were in a very different place. We had an absolute different level of maturity. We had an absolute different perspective. We were financially in a very different place. And where we are now is where we are now.
I agree with, I remember, and it had a bad taste in my mouth then, but I think now, looking at our financial picture, and I can't wait to do the finance
Report.
report this month, but we are, and they do recognize it now.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
have to, because it's there. They
Yeah.
cannot
Yeah.
recognize what we're doing. So I don't think we have to gloat, but I think they know that we're going in the right direction on what we're
And
doing.
we got growth on our side.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And if you remember, this last month, one of the things that we did was bring their directors of the bigger departments in so that they could have a little closer eyes on who we are, what we do, and some of our processes. And every one of those engagements, they walked away expressing a different opinion, that their idea of us was elevated by the experience, that they were impressed, and they were full of ideas, that was really impressive.
Positive
too.
ideas?
Positive ideas,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not ideas of, oh, we could bring such and so in to fix you. It was, oh, what you're doing and what we're doing would really go together in this very amazing way. You know, so it was a lot of those really
Collaborative.
opportunistic,
Yeah.
collaborative growth ideas. Yeah, so it was a collection of all of that. But I think we all of us that were involved with them and their teams as well.
That's very positive.
Yeah.
It was very
Yeah.
collegial.
Were you able to get
Modest,
some
yeah.
of these ideas that you've been getting in the last year, as far as some of these little extra financial gains, all of our little programs? Were you getting some of that from Overlake, did you? Or were you just going out and to the collaborative and finding these things that we
The things
want
that
to?
we're doing,
That we're
all
doing?
of our
It's
our
Kim being
revenue
very
projections.
creative.
Well, I know that.
I'm gonna give her credit.
I know
Come on,
that.
guys.
Yeah, and
But,
that's just,
I mean, are they helping on that? No, okay, so you're just talking of the collaborative.
when we leverage the collaborative to be our customers for one of the projects.
Yeah.
And then the other is, so the reference lab is the result of, again, it's our core values living out. And so one of the reference lab is the fact that we maintain excellent relationships. And so a relationship from the past came and wanted to reconnect with us, to become business partners, because their experience from the past was so very positive and held us in such regard. And so that's what's resulted in a partnership around Reference Lab, because he wanted to build his own company, and so that's what we're doing. And then the CBO is the collaborative, we're doing an internal service to other collaborative members.
It's
Thinking
saving
now.
them money and we're making money.
Using our, because we have the expertise, we have the tools to do it. And so because of the expertise, the tools, and the efficiencies for us to add on wasn't as much as it would be for somebody else to start it up. And in an external company, we fleece you. So, we left it. And then our sleep lab it was an opportunity, so for somebody,
I think that's a big score.
business partner, yep,
Yeah, and it's,
get it off the finish line.
much like Overlake, we're viewed as providing high-quality services, which we continue to kids.
So-
We have been able to maintain and improve, quality.
So anyway, in your comment, I hope that some of the things we're talking about, that does answer and your concerns, because they were my concerns up until maybe a year ago.
Yeah, I think the comments that I've heard regarding this are very positive.
Just figuring out what's the right way for the next step.
Just to be clear, so you mark yes on due diligence and you mark yes on definitive.
Do you want me to jump to that?
I'm sorry.
No, you're.
I'm going to.
Emma, you are always going to keep us moving forward.
Yeah, really. You just want to-
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I do want to go back, and so the trust. So all that, the work that we did on the trust agreement, so the trust is only an issue in the right-hand one.
Yeah.
And so the work that we did on the trust has not progressed any further. It's just sitting. We finished it and we handed it off to Overlake to give some response back. It was delivered to them at within a day of them discovering what they discovered. And so they said it is truly set there. They've not invested any time. It's ready to be returned to if the right-hand side, the lease operating, is the path we end up going down. But it's not a part of the management services, so it's just in a parking lot state right now. As are leases, as is the certificate of need issue, because that will be dependent on which of the choices that we make. But now, and that's gonna take us into timeline, so June, July, August last month. So last month, we were on pace, but I said, I'm worried about the due diligence that we may fall into September. So here we are in September. I went ahead and left it as a yes because we did complete it. So it's budging a little. We completed it with a September date, and here it's a September date, but pretty close. But we are not on schedule in regard to definitive agreement and trust agreement, and it's because we're having to just pause and now relook at everything again. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that's
Because
where we
of
are right
August
now.
8th, they were all yes, and then today,
Right.
They were changed, replaced by
Yeah.
N. Okay.
Yeah. So, if we change course to anything other than the lease agreement, the lease operating agreement,
Mhm.
it will necessitate that we create a new timeline. So, but we'll get there. I think that is the very last slide, and it's 5 minutes till. Is there any other big concerns that you want us to take into the next week or two as we have these meetings? We've been learning a lot. Okay, Daryl, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I guess we've covered just about everything on this list. We covered due diligence summary updates, we covered the definitive agreement, we covered trust, we didn't really cover land and building leases.
Yeah, they
They
were
were-
on there, yeah, we made it all the way down to adjournment.
And certificate of need, we talked about that, and timeline check. I guess we will adjourn if I get a motion for adjournment for.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.